Truth, lies, shenanigans.
We're going to start off today with Liz E.
Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh.
Liz
Up
E.
first,
Is this
up
a truth,
first.
lie, or shenanigan?
This is a truth. Again, I always get, the truth and the shenanigans. But this is a little bit of both, but it's definitely truth. For those of you who are not in the know, but also those of you who have been following, on Monday, we began the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett. So she is in line. She is Trump's nominee to take over to replace, if you will, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away a little over a month ago now, if you will. So the confirmation hearings started on Monday. They've been very testy. They've been very intense.
As expected.
The Democrats, even though the Democrats have at this point no chance of winning, against her being nominated, but they have hit her with a lot of questions, and some of her questions or some of her answers to those questions have been a little suspect. Now, for those of you who don't know who she is a lawyer. She has been on staff with the University of Notre Dame. She's very conservative. She is anti-Affordable Care Act. She's anti-abortion. She is anti-LGBTQ. Like, she's very conservative. She is also kind of against a lot of women's issues, if you will. But specifically, she was asked pointed questions this week about recent events in the United States as it regards to social injustice, if you will. So the first question she was asked that people took note of was in regards to George Floyd. We all know that George Floyd was murdered by the police in Minnesota back in May. So this was her response to the George Floyd question.
Have you seen the George Floyd video?
Given that I have two Black children, that was very, very personal for my family. And my 17-year-old daughter, Vivian, who's adopted from Haiti, we wept together. My daughter, Juliet, who's 10, I had to try to explain some of this to them. I mean, my children, to this point in their lives, have had the benefit of growing up in a cocoon where they have not yet experienced hatred or violence.
So my question to my gents here, first and foremost, was that a legitimate answer to that question? Or was she pimping out her Black kids? Let's go to Rob.
This one I had to really think about, just because, for those who don't know, I have two children from from a Jamaican woman. So my kids are darker than I am, and I've had to deal with racially sensitive issues from an outsider perspective in dealing with the kids. Um, as a parent, I can appreciate how difficult that would have been, to have that conversation with the 10-year-old. To say that the 17-year-old has lived in a cocoon and hasn't really experienced hatred and stuff, okay, that's kind of a suspect statement, but it doesn't change the fact that it was an awful traumatic event, and that at that time she had to play the role of a mother. Um, does it lend itself well to political discourse and image? Sure, but I don't think that. I hope that she didn't set out to adopt Black children specifically for career gains. That would be pretty, yeah. I mean, not just be unethical, but I think it was sincere.
Also,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So my thoughts are, there was some sincerity to it, but uh, I didn't, I didn't particularly like the concept of they were in a cocoon, so they hadn't experienced hatred and violence. Um, because if you're watching TV, you're experiencing hatred and violence to people of color. If you're watching movies, you're experiencing hatred and violence to people of color. So I didn't like the fact that she's talking. Maybe she felt as though she's protected them from that. But the images every day that they're looking at and they're seeing, she hasn't really protected them as well as she thinks. That's why the George Floyd, if they did which they probably did. I'm sure her daughters felt that um, because of the experiences they've had that maybe she's not aware of. But with that being said, I mean, is she pimping her kids out? I don't know that she's pimping them out. I know that the GOP is. I know
Mm.
that was certainly played a role
Yeah,
into why they picked
yeah.
her. It made her a better pick. But I don't think she adopted her kids with the anticipation of, becoming a
Oh,
Supreme Court justice. I don't think she. And the question was kind of leading to that. So go ahead, Lizzie.
I mean, I think it's the same with Mitt Romney. Like, people make comments about Mitt Romney because he has um, an adopted. If I have the story correct, he has an adopted black grandchild, and people were poking fun of that particular truth about him. And I agree with you, Neo. I don't think that she, adopted these two kids, especially since, her oldest of the two adopted kids is 17. I don't think she adopted these two kids with the intent of using them as leverage or political gain. However, words mean a lot, you know the way we frame things, especially in a public setting, it means a lot. And so for her to answer that question and immediately go to, given the fact that I have two black kids, reminds me of, well, I can't be racist because I have a black friend.
Mm,
Like, you're not answering the question, if you will. Like, the question was, how did you respond to George Floyd? And you really didn't give your response. You initially threw your kids into our face.
true.
So if you didn't have these two black kids, would your response have been different from a humanity
Yeah,
standpoint? And then
and
what about,
that's
the other children in your family? Like, this, I understand what she's saying, that she has to frame it differently as the white mother of a black child, that she has to have difficult conversations with her black children. But in the same respect, you also have white children. And so you have to talk about also their response, and again, answer the question: what was your response to what
mhm.
you saw that happened to George Floyd? And so that's why I was just like, okay, here we go again, here we go again, here we go again. But no, I don't think her intention in adopting those children at all was for any type of political gain, anything that she thought that she could, like, use or pull out, as um, a get out of jail free card, if you
Hmm.
will, in the
Yeah.
future. I just think, we need to, in 2020, we have to be better about how we speak on these issues in
Mhm.
public. So that goes to my next point, in that she was also taken to task this week in the confirmation hearings about her response, or her defending racial slurs. So there was an incident that arose. I'm not quite sure what year this happened. Trying to look this up. But there was a workplace discrimination lawsuit by a woman named Terry Smith, a Black employee of the Illinois Department of Transportation, who sued the agency after he was fired. I said a woman, it's a man. Among the discriminatory actions that Smith alleges the IDOT allowed in what he considered a hostile workplace were being addressed to by the N word, frequently by his supervisor. Now, Barrett joined a unanimous three-judge decision dismissing Smith's discrimination suit. She didn't think that that was just cause, him being repeatedly called the N word by his supervisor was worthy of a discrimination suit. So it begs the question: what about your Black children that you were so quick to point out in one instance as it related to George Floyd? Do you not think that they would have just cause if one of their teachers was constantly referring to them as the N word? If one of their supervisors was constantly referring to them as the N word? Neo?
Yeah, I think that she um, she doesn't have a. I mean, just her comment alone about her children being in a cocoon. I don't think she has a good sense of what it is to be black in America. I don't think she has an understanding of what that is. And you would think that when she's saying cocoon, that she's protecting them, but I still feel like she's looking at it from her perspective. Um, and I don't feel like she's really putting herself in her children's shoes. Um, I think like Rob B has spoken often about his children, and when you listen to Rob B talk about his children and his children's experiences, he's often talking in a way where he's viewing it from their point of view. And I don't think she's
Their
looking
lens.
at it right. I don't think she's
Mhm.
looking at it like that. I think she's looking at it as her own point of view and what she sees and what she believes they're dealing with, um, as a white mother of black children. And so you know, I don't know that it plays a role in her comments or her thoughts on using racial slurs. And I feel like there's some ignorance here, and I don't think her having black children, you know, brings a light to that ignorance. I do believe that in the future, going forward, there may be some opportunities because her children are about to be faced with some serious things. Being in the limelight as the way they are, they're no longer going to be in a cocoon. And the way she put them out there, they're definitely not going to be in a cocoon. So she's going to have to empathize with their position. Robbie?
Robbie?
Yeah, and that's it. That's what I found really funny was that in her comments about this particular case, uh, she was very dismissive of the use of the N word in the workplace in the context that it was being used in the workplace. Her comments were to the effect that it wasn't being used in such a way that it would impact his performance or those communications. It was just it was flippant. So, like to further illustrate what Neil was saying, that there's a there's an ignorance there, a profound ignorance, and you have to have that willingness to really see it from the other perspective. Did she empathize with her kids? Did her heart break with her children? More than likely, because it was very tragic. I know that I had to talk to my daughter about it, and that was very difficult, very challenging. But yeah, it's there's definitely something that's not registering. It's definitely something that's not registering.
Yeah.
There seems to be, like, I agree with you, Rob. I think that there's a disconnect, if you will. And I don't necessarily think it's just about race, because my last point is going to be about LGBTQ. But I think it's something that we often see with people who are on the far conservative right. Like, they don't necessarily consider things outside of their experience. It's always seen through their lens, and then everyone else outside of that just has to adjust. And I'm not even sure if she's cognizant of it. It sounds like she isn't. It definitely sounded like she wasn't cognizant of it. So my last point, yesterday she was called out in the congressional hearings, in the confirmation hearings, about her reference to homosexuals, to people in the LGBTQ community, um, as having a sexual preference, if you will. And she was immediately called out about that. That term is a source of contention. And in her defense, she immediately corrected herself. Once it was pointed out that that's problematic, she tried to correct herself. But then it begs the question, but do you not understand why even using that, especially someone who's going to be responsible for policy and laws in this country, as it relates to this group, do you understand why people might be cautious with you so flippantly using that term and having to be corrected in front of Congress and being reminded what it actually
Well,
means?
And,
Rob?
and let me jump
Oh,
in. So,
no, you can go.
I got to be honest. It's personally, it's hard to keep up with what is socially acceptable and what's not from, month to month, year to year. I actually, didn't know that referring to sexual preference was a problem until, you brought my attention to it. So I don't know that I'm going to hold that against her. I don't think I would
But
hold that
it's not.
against her.
But this isn't anything new. This is something that has been.
It's new to me, so I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like her, it's new to her.
If
But
someone
she
exactly
is.
lives at that extreme end of the bubble, then even for someone that I consider myself to be enlightened, and you had to educate me prior to the show as to why this was considered offensive. So for someone who lives at the right end of the spectrum, I can see where that might fall off her radar, and I give her props for at least correcting herself when it was brought to her
I agree
attention,
with that,
which
actually.
is, to me, that's the mark of someone who can at least learn a little bit, but she does have a lot of far right ideas that need to be corrected.
And that's what I was gonna say. Let me just get my Jimmy in here very quickly.
All right, time's up. We gotta go ahead, make the point real quick. I did have one last point I wanted to make too.
That in itself to me though is very scary because again we're talking about someone who is going to be the next one of the next Supreme Court justices, and even before that, a judge who is responsible for law and legislation in this country, who can be making determinations about the LGBT community. So, for you not to understand that to say sexual preference means that you are agreeing that these people are willingly choosing to be gay, to be bi, to be whatever, also means that they can choose not to be. Therefore, they don't deserve equal rights and protections. That's
Potentially.
scary to me.
Yeah,
That's
I could
scary
see
to
the
me.
fear in that. Um, Let me just get some comments online. Mike Winter says she didn't apologize for what she said either. Um, Rupka asks, do black people have to justify themselves by saying they have black children? Because
Mm,
white people tend to justify, saying I have black kids.
that's a very good question.
Not that
Have you
Rob has
ever
ever
heard a
Rob's
black
never done
person?
that. So it's not that's not a
But have you ever?
generalization.
No, Rob's never done it to
He's
us. You've
never.
never done that to us. But also, I don't think I have black friends who answer a question first. Well, because I have black children. Now you might see as the conversation goes on, you might see black mothers of black sons say, "I have a black son, so I am concerned." But it's
Mhm.
not in a way that is like, okay, well, like I said, I have black friends, so I'm not racist. It's never in that same vein. You don't get that same feel from it. So I just think and again, I don't know this woman very well.
I don't either.
I
That's
just
one
think
thing.
that there, like Rob said, I think there's a lot of growth. There's a
Yeah.
lot of growth
I mean,
that needs to
I
be
want to
done.
say so. Last time we talked about the SCOTUS and the nomination, I think was when we were talking Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think episode 48, and I had in that
Ooh,
episode I
look at you
said
dropping
Trump would,
the episode.
huh?
I said, look at you dropping the episode.
Yeah, I don't
Oh,
know.
brother.
I'm trying to because actually, you wanna know why I remembered it is because we had that post.
Technical difficulties.
Well, all right. So anyway, I said Trump would need to would really have to put up a moderate. He would have to put up a moderate. And to be honest, I think he put up one of the best options we could hope for from him. You know, now I don't know her very well, like you said. I don't know if she's going to vote or along the lines that I would want or that she agrees with um, my things. But I feel like her record alone, I mean, she's not experienced enough, obviously, but her record alone, I think that she is a decent candidate. And I think that if this were a different time and we weren't dealing with Trump and we weren't 19 days from an election, I think she would pass easily with bipartisan support. Actually,
Well, one, she's only been a federal judge for 2 years.
right?
But also I don't like she's a decent candidate, but I don't think she would be the number one candidate.
No, certainly not.
I
She's
think
certainly
that
not
there
the
would,
one that they would have normally picked because
yeah,
No.
right now, because it's 19 days from the election, they had to pick somebody who could appeal to independents and moderates because
and to
that's
women,
and to right
they
and to women.
and to women, yeah.
And I do think she has some. I don't think she's going to be totally against the ideals that we may want. I don't think she's going to be totally against them. I think it does say something that she has black children, because there will, like I said, there will come times where she's going to need to empathize with their situation. So anyway, let's do anything else. I will move on. That was a good topic, Lizzie. Thank you for that
That
one.
was good. Thank you.
All right. So
Thank the notorious ACB. Thank the notorious ACB. Amy Coney Barrett. Yes.
Shenanigans, truth, lies, shenanigans.